I'm so excited Karl is able to join us today. Karl is a trusted colleague. I actually reach out to Karl quite a bit to just consult when I get stuck on certain things and cases. And I've had the privilege of knowing him since 2015, which is crazy, Karl. We've known each other for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. So he's a trusted colleague and a dear friend. We met when we were both working on our master's work at Liberty University. And Karl enters every room with wisdom. He enters with, it's true, don't laugh. He enters with humility, joy, and that fabulous Karl smile. And that goes with him into every single room he enters. And I got to enjoy that for years. So very grateful for that. And he has his LPC from Liberty, your LCDC as well, which is usually what I end up calling you for, all your wisdom around that. And so he's going to be sharing with us today. I love your theoretical approach that you have on your Psychology Today page. And I had to cut and paste it because it was from the wise work of Dr. Seuss.
Correct.
Exactly. And it says, today you are you. That is truer than true. There's no one alive who is youer than you. It's very profound. So we're going to have to learn more about that at our next brown bag. But today, Karl's here to speak with us about the experiential side and work of counseling, how we move beyond techniques with our clients into the felt experience of connection, insight, and change. So I'm handing the floor to you, and I can't wait to learn from you today.
Right on. Thank you guys so much for having me. I have sat where you've sat. And so I want to give you, again, the kudos of you're on a journey, and I'm just a fellow traveler a little further down the road. And I just want to share some things that I found to be very helpful in my career that, again, will hopefully help you help your clients, because that's ultimately our goal, is to be of service to those who seek healings and help. And I always remind myself, throughout this journey, I don't control outcomes. That's one thing I've really learned through my journey is we are simply the portals. And again, our job is to provide the space. I like to keep my clients between the guardrails. And so again, I really just want to remind you guys, as I go over a lot of things today, some may work for you, some may not. But I'm just going to share with you kind of how I got to where I am today, because I started as a substance abuse counselor in a women's prison 20 years ago. And again, I've learned a lot since then. So I'm just going to go over a lot of different things I found to be helpful. In the room with me today is our clinical director where I'm working now, and she is amazing. This is Amy Shelton. She's a doctor of something really important. That's all I know. But she's an amazing woman whom I trust, and she's going to be one of my, again, helpers today as we learn different experiential things. I guess the first thing I really want to start with, guys, is rapport. Early in my career as a therapist, I think the client would sit down on the couch. I'm like, what's wrong? Why are you here? And I found that, again, that's a great question, but study after study shows us that it's really not about our theories that we use in the room as much as the trust and the connection we have with the client. So I really challenge you to, where's that rapport of just like have them sit down. And often what I will do is, even from the early beginning, is I got a sheet of laminated tickets from concerts I went to in high school that go back all the way to the early 80s. And be patient with me. I'm from the 1900s. And so just by putting concert tickets in their hand and like, hey, if you could go on tour with any band in the height of their day, who would you go on tour with and why? Again, just make your people. They're our clients, but at the end of the day, they're people. And so I just want to remind you guys, like, connect with them. What's one thing to this day that I really, really focus on is, because experiential is very emotional. And if you stick too much to the data of what's going on, you're going to lose a whole big part of the session around the emotion. And so there's going to be 3 channels that we talk about today: the emotional, physical, spiritual. And I've had clients that have sought me out like, hey, I looked at your profile and you were at Liberty. I really want Liberty, Christian, biblical perspective. And it's like, okay, but let's start with who you are as a person first. And so again, rapport. Make sure that you're really working on that from the first moment you sit down with them all the way through the session to, again, as you develop that relationship. One of the goals I've added through my talk therapy process is I've asked the client for the goal in their words. I have them actually write it down. So the modalities that I've worked in throughout my career have been in, again, incarcerated men and women. I've worked for Salvation Army, helping the homeless. I've worked in really bougie treatment centers in North Central Texas. I've worked with veterans. I've worked with teens. One summer was the longest summer of my life. Figured out real quick that's not my gig. And I've worked with elderly. I've worked with veterans. And so one thing that I've really learned about is, what is their goal for talk therapy? And I actually have them write it down. And what I do is, again, the more that you can get your clients to write out, because I challenge them early on about the second or third session. I say, will you pick up a spiral? And let's call it my therapy journey. Because I want your words to talk about what we're doing. And your words are more powerful than mine. So that gives me something to work with when you've got your spiral of, like, when something comes up outside of our office, write it in your spiral so we can come back and revisit that. Or I will give homework assignments and that they'll do in their spiral, so they'll bring with them. So again, it gives me that chance to just keep connecting. But one thing I do around their goal, probably about the 4th or 5th session, is I have them scale 1 to 10 underneath their goal. And I'll ask them, okay, if our very first session together with your goal, if we can scale that as a 1, we're beginning this journey together. And where do you think we're at now? We're 2 months into our process. Are we a 3? Are we a 4? Are we a 5? And so by adding scaling, you're letting them determine the level of efficiency with the therapy process. And I said, there may be times where you feel like it goes backwards, and that's okay. Put dates on those scales so we can take a look at those together, so we can evaluate what's working, what we need to tweak, what we need to change, what would you like to add. And even through that process of the goal, maybe I'm 6 months down the road with this client, we're like at 8 on their scaling process with their original goal. And I'll ask them, like, do you want to modify your goal? Do you want to add something to it? Do you want to take something away? As your goals change based on what we've covered so far. So that client-centered approach of, like, this is their therapy. So I'm guilty of thinking I want to take a client this way based on what I hear from them. And I'm guilty of that. And I will steer the therapy that way. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, we're going this way. Did you want to go? Like, because this is what I think we need to go do. Like, Karl, I think that's great, but why do we need to go that way? And be able to back it up. Well, here's what I hear you saying. Here's my concerns around that. But it's your goal, your therapy. I'll go where you want to go. But as therapists, we hear stories and we connect with people. And sometimes, again, guilty, like, I think this client really needs to work on codependency. I'm hearing a lot of codependent behavior, but they don't know what that is. And so our goal is, again, to make sure we're coming back to, what is your goal? And if they ask me, hey, here's one thing I'd like for you to consider. Tell me what you think. Go research this. Come back and tell me if you'd like to learn more about it. But by adding scaling, now we're at a place where we can measure progress based on what they think. Okay? I want to do a quick credit to one of my very first clinical directors, because, again, when I became a therapist in a prison, I had a little small office and a chair and a table, and it was talk therapy. And again, there was nowhere to go but talk therapy. And I feel like I got a little pigeonholed when I got to this real bougie treatment center one day. I'm sitting in my office with this 19-year-old schizoaffective male. And out in the community, residential treatment, he was interacting, he was talkative, But every time I brought him into my office to do talk therapy, he would just freeze up and shut down. And I tried every question, every open-ended approach, motivational. I tried all these things, and he was just shut down. And I'm getting supervision from my director. So he's like, take him down to the river and throw rocks. I'm like, what? Take him down to the river and throw rocks. I'm like, yes, ma'am. I left her office. I took him down the river to throw rocks, and he would not stop talking. When I put rocks in his hands and we just skipped them, all of a sudden it was like, man, I used to do this when I was a kid. Wow, tell me about that. And then, this one, and then it just, again, it just provided this whole new avenue for someone to start talking outside the clinical office. And that's where I really begin to like, okay, there's something to this. Experiential is get them out of the office or create something in your office that now becomes experiential. So throughout my career, I began to learn and understand theories and trainings, and I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting. And those are great, but sometimes it's just even as simple. I was working at a treatment center here in Nashville, and I had a client who was really had a lot of trauma as far as religious trauma. It was dragged to church, and church leadership really guilt and shamed this kid because he was drinking and drugging as a teen, and just he really just struggled with just self-worth, self-esteem, and being enough. And he self-medicated with drugs and alcohol to avoid all the negative feelings he was going through. I remember one day it was real nice out, and he was kind of mopey and just kind of staring at his feet too much. And I had a couple of baseball gloves and a baseball in my office. Let's go throw the ball. We went outside and started playing catch. And again, as soon as his hands got busy, his mouth opened up. He started sharing more and more and more of the trauma that he wanted to let go of. And again, it's just the lights kept coming on for me. And so my office is literally filled with things I put in my clients' hands. I get them on their feet. I move them around. One thing that I do in my career now since moving to Nashville is I've connected with a program called Onsite. And Onsite does experiential work on 300 acres of land with horses and water and goats. We have an animal petting zoo. We have a petting zoo. We have art therapy. We have forest bathing. I didn't even know what that was until I got out there. We have this lady that comes in with martial arts sticks. We have sound healing, sound baths. We have all these experiential tools at our disposal to help these clients move through, open up, and again, get out of the chair of talk therapy. When you move people around, when you create environments for them to open their hearts, something happens. And so I recreate that in my office through various outlets. But I'm always going back to the 3 channels of emotional, physical, spiritual. Emotionally, okay, clients, where are we at? How are you regulating? What's grounding? Resource them. What helps you when you're anxious? What makes it worse? Physical, how are you taking care of yourself? How's your sleep? What's your food intake like? Are you eating healthy? So when it comes to spiritual, that can be a buzzword that's good or bad. And so I always preface my spiritual channel with not organized religion. I'm talking about spirituality, because out here in Tennessee, we got a phrase that we got more Baptists than people in Tennessee. And spirituality for some people immediately goes right to religion, and that's not always good for some people. So I specify spiritual as can be anything that connects you to people, to the earth, to the energy, whatever that is, and an aspect of how are you utilizing that channel to be a better human? How does it make you better? And so in order to really, again, you're going to run into clients that want spiritual to be religion. And if that's the channel, run with it. But I've also sat across many clients who are, quote, religious, that or just off base or struggled with what God has done or hasn't done in their life. And so we spend time unpacking that. So specify with your client, again, back to client centered. How biblical do you want to go with this? How spiritual do you want to go with this? And that I will, again, it comes back at me sometimes because I went to Liberty. They'll ask me, well, why did you go to Liberty? What's your biblical views on this? And again, I will report to them, look, I married a preacher's daughter because I like the way she drank beer. That's how I got in the club. But what I found is spirituality and religion can overlap or be very separate. And what I want from my client is to meet them where they're at, what they want to know. So my views don't matter as much as I've been trained on through Liberty, the biblical views on things, but I use it only as an enhancer, not as a weapon, because too often biblical approach can be weaponizing for what people need. And so be real careful before you pull out scripture. Is this going to, again, our first creed is do no harm. And so if you're going to use scripture, use it in a way that enhances the experience, not makes it worse. Okay? So far, so good? Okay. One of the very first things I do when I'm at on-site, when I sit down with my clients, is I do timelines. If my client comes in, 42-year-old white male, he's struggling with depression, anxiety, self-worth. He reports on his GAD and his PHQ-9, moderate depression, moderate anxiety. He's married, 2 kids, likes his job, goes to church, plays golf with his buddies, blah, blah, blah. One of the very first things I want to do with my client is do what I call a timeline. Because I want to say, where did we start this journey? Where did the anxiety and depression start to show up? So I break it up in decades. I do from birth to 9, and I do 10 to 19, and I do 20 to 29. I just have the client write down anything that they find to be relevant in that time. Relationships, parenting, marriage, college, trade school, whatever it is, legal, just these timelines. Because I'm really, really big about inner children. And I'm going to talk about that after my timeline. But if I can at least break down into these decades and sit down with them and kind of unpack what they wrote down through the lens of emotional, physical, spiritual, that gives you so much to work with in a therapeutic office if that's my template I'm going to work from. And again, the clients don't even realize how much they give you in these timelines, where, again, I can spend 3 months on timelines with clients. When I do on-site workshops, it's a 4-day experience for the clients. So it's literally 3.5 days of one-on-one with an individual, couple, or family. And it starts with a morning lecture from 8:30 to 10. And from 10:30 till 5 p.m., it's one-on-one therapy. And we will literally spend probably a whole day on timelines because so many things can be unpacked there. From trauma, from abuse, to even victories, birth of children, fertility struggles. There's so much in a timeline that really kind of opens up, that gives you things to work with. Now, when I talk about inner children, you'll hear a lot of therapists talk about the inner child. And I used to be on board with the inner child until I learned about inner children. As I worked on timelines, what I found was each decade had different children in it that had a serious, profound impact on who they are, where they are. In my own personal life, I got sober from alcohol at the age of 38. And being an Enneagram 7, it was real important for me to get sober because you don't want to combine alcohol and Enneagram 7. It's too much for the world. So that's really important to get sober. But what I found was I was physically 38 years old, but emotionally about 15 years old. And my 15-year-old self was like, what are you doing? You have children, you have a job. What are you doing? This was our favorite thing, to drink too much. And what happened was I had to really kind of meet that 15-year-old where they're at, in my own personal therapy of like, I got to work on this. Because when you've got an inner child inside of an adult that doesn't get their way or is traumatized around something in their life, they get stuck. And that inner child comes out and they're like, hey, you're not paying enough attention to me. I'm not getting my needs met. I don't feel seen or heard. And people will self-sabotage behind an emotional child. Now, that doesn't mean it's just that one 15-year-old, because being married almost 38, 40 years, it only feels like 50. I will get in situations in my life where I've got fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, and or I don't get my way, or I don't feel hurt. I can be a 10-year-old. I could be a 19-year-old. I can be 14. I can have different things. We can watch a movie and maybe something triggers me and I'm back to something that happened at 6 years old. And all of a sudden that 6-year-old needs to be seen or heard. And so I like the term inner children, helping my client identify like, hey, it seems like when you go to these family reunions, like one of your inner children shows up and really kind of acts out and causes some chaos for you. Does that sound right? Like, how old do you become when you're around this family member? How old do you become at work when your boss calls you into office and offers you criticism or feedback on something? Like, what age do you turn into all of a sudden? Do you shut down when it comes to confrontation with your spouse? How old are you in that moment? And so each of those inner children need to be seen and heard. And so I often, again, back to the spiral, the therapy spiral, I have my clients write children letters to their inner children. But one thing after I do that is I bring them in and I have them change chairs with me when they read their inner child letter, like they're reading it to themselves on the couch. And what I like to do after that is the homework after that is to write a letter from inner child to current self to close the loop. Because if you're only reaching out to the inner child to validate them, they need to be heard. So based on the letter they write to the inner child, have the inner child write back to them. Hey, I feel seen. I feel heard. And again, begins that relationship. So when that child shows up, there's an existing relationship. It's not just the authority figure self saying, hey, chill out. We got to chill out on this. It's like, no, I can hear you. I can see you. If I'm on site, I give them crayons. I have them draw a picture of that inner child. What were they wearing? How were they acting back then? And by having that visual with crayons, now I'm adding more experiential, because the smell of crayons, where does it take you to? Most people, they'll say kindergarten. And for most people, kindergarten was a safe space. So just by using those crayons and creating that smell, it adds to the creation and connection to that inner child. So I keep markers in my office. I got matte pencils. Here in Nashville, we're guilty of having a few songwriters that are inspiring, and they're always trying to make it big with a song. I will have them come in and we'll do lyrics and we'll write songs to inner child. And I'll have them use the markers, because sometimes they'll like, if you could design your album cover, what would it look like? And we'll get paper out and we'll do markers and create album covers and just color. And again, when that marker and pen is moving, the mouth is moving. They're opening up, sharing more and more and more. So that's my pitch on inner children is really make sure that you're letting each one have a voice, not just one. Okay? Now, in addition to my clients, I like to see between age 16 and up. And with that comes a different challenge of my teen clients. If you'll notice behind me, I got some game lights on the wall. That my teen clients, we will use music. When they come sit down, there's a level of anxiety already as they're teenagers. 16 physically, but sometimes younger, 10, 11 emotionally. So I'm like, pick a song. And they'll pull up their phones and they'll play a song, and the lights will actually dance to the different songs. I can put a setting on it, and they think that's cool. When they think that's cool, they think I'm cool. When they think I'm cool, they open up more. So put things in your office that, again, creates connection. It's their environment. 2 weeks ago, I had a client I've been working with for about 3 years. We're really working on, for her, kind of the breaking out of the relationships underneath her parents. And she's been overly dependent upon them emotionally. She comes from Mormon background and generations of a Mormon family with a lot of what she's going through, guilt and control. And we've been for 3 years working on her having some independence, some autonomy outside of from the parents. And we've done all kinds of exercises to burning letters. She went through some things in the river one time. She has done all kinds of things, and we've gotten closer and closer to kind of, again, creating a healthy disconnect, because she's almost 40 now and still struggling with that, just a child around her parents. And she came in 2 weeks ago and she had 3 teddy bears, and they were all weaved together with black yarn. And she was in the middle, and they had a parent on each end. And I just asked her to tell me her story with this. And she began to talk how she feels just stuck in the middle of the control of her parents financially and emotionally. And I reached into my desk and I offered a pair of scissors. I said, what would you like to do with these scissors? And as she began to cut the yarn that was connecting all 3 teddy bears, she just cried and cried. And I just held that space. One of the most important things you can do as therapists is learn to be quiet. Quiet is okay. And I just sat and watched her cut these yarns. And she picked up that middle teddy bear and just held it while rocking back and forth, comforting this bear who was her. And the yarn and the other animals just fell to the ground. And just being in that moment of being extremely quiet, the client did all the work. I just had to be present. And this is like 10 minutes before our session's up. Like, this is towards the end. There's yarn everywhere. There's bears on the ground. And she kind of comes up and looks for some validation. I just smiled and just said, great job. And she's like, do I need to clean all this up? I said, no. Just leave it here. I'll take care of this. You go take care of that little bear that you got. And so this was a couple weeks ago, and I've seen that client since then. And I said, where's that bear? She said, right in the middle of my bed. And my bear's doing great. The bear's thriving. And she's learning and she's growing. So the client came up with that. I didn't have anything to do with those bears, but she brought them in and showed me what she wanted to do. And it was an amazing experience just to be part of. So make sure you look for times to be quiet, because it's super important you do that sometimes. And just let the client be the client. Okay? I want to talk a little bit about psychodrama. I'm halfway through, and I'm going to utilize my partner in here for this part. I'm kind of known as the couples guy at OnSite. So I do a lot of couples work. Being married, again, almost 38 years, I will tell my couples that I will be utilizing my academic background, additional trainings I've been through, but also accessing what works in my house. And again, if I share it in session, this is through my training, this is through my education, here's what works at my house. And we again kind of kick that around and let them decide what to pick up and what to move around with that. But one of the most powerful things I do with my clients is I first got to gauge, they each have an individual goal, and we have a couples goal. So in that process, there's 3 goals we're working on all the time. So each one is scaled, individual goals and couples goals with 2 people. It's more work, but what I find is by giving them each a goal and a couples goal, now there's a shared vision. We're not just coming and working on conflict resolution anymore. There's shared goals and individual goals. So everyone has a voice. I really like that with my couples because I'm trying to create a team environment for them. It's something that they can work towards together as a couple. With that, I use vision boards. I use psychodrama. For a lot of my men, they like couples counseling with a male therapist because in the past they've reported going to female therapists and feeling ganged up on, or that they were being feminized in couples therapy. So I tend to be a little bit harder on the men, just coming from a male perspective. And so again, I find that to be helpful in the aspect of I will let him know, like, hey, I need to bring you something. You need me to sugarcoat this? Or you want me to just hit you with it hard? And both of them are like, come on. So one of the very first things I ask my men when I'm working with couples is like, would you jump in front of a bullet to save her? And most men are like, well, I mean, like, hypothetically, like, I'm like, bro, answer the question, yes or no. Would you jump in front of a bullet to save her? Yes. And then I turn to the why. Do you feel like he would jump in front of a bullet to save you? And most of the time, there's a slow yes. Sometimes there's a maybe, and sometimes there's a no. If I get a no, I look back at him. I go, who's at fault if she says no? He says, that's on me. So that's right. And so it's that space of, okay, if you would do that physically, how can you do that emotionally? How can you jump in front of emotional bullets and you see them just go blank? I don't know what that is. I said, exactly. I'm going to teach you what that is. And so it's that space of emotional intelligence, emotional intimacy. But you can teach a man that if they can understand what it is they need to learn. And so back to that, would you jump in front of a bullet for her? Actually get them on their feet. I'm getting my partner here. And I have the girls hold their hand out, put their fist in it. Because this right here is the size of her heart. So I have the guys stand there. I said, put your hands around it like, okay, I got this. I'm like, all right, what do you want to tell that heart? Like, no, so don't tell me, tell her. Like, I love this heart. That sounded convincing. Can you do that again? I love this heart. So what else you want to tell this heart? I want to protect it. I want to make sure that it's safe. And if you just keep letting him stand there and feel awkward, he'll come up with enough things to where it creates, again, it will flood the client most of the time. And it especially floods the wife. So you got to give him a minute to kind of process all the words. And after I put him on the spot with all that, I'll make him swap. And he puts his hand in his fist. And it's like, what do you want to tell that heart? And she'll say things like, I want to love it. I want to respect it. I want it to feel safe. And again, she'll use a lot of duplicate words. But what happens now is he gets flooded. And then after you, again, have them on their feet and they're staring at one another long enough, and they're both flooded to some degree, you'll find the place where it's kind of run its course. Then I'll say, hug it out. And they'll hug, and they'll sit down, and they'll be all like, that was really powerful. That was really hard. But it's that space of they don't do these kind of behaviors at home. So to duplicate that in a clinical office sets a stage for you can do this at home. And so part of my homework to them is to recreate that. And if I'm at on-site, one thing that they have a lot is scarves. And so when they're holding their hearts with one another, I'll wrap their hands in these red scars. And if they're biblical and they're Christian perspective, I will say, I'm going to leave while you guys pray for your marriage. And I'll leave the room. And I say, you crack the door when you're ready for me to come back. But it's that space of, if you can create that bond, that trust, and I'll get them on their feet with eye contact. Because if you got them sitting on the couch, they're not really looking at one another. So you get them up on their feet, and you got to move them around, and you got to, again, I will do exercises with them where I'll put them back to back, and they'll share different things, because when they're doing it face to face, sometimes they're nonverbals, there's trigger, there's words where they just get, I'll put them back to back, and let's try the conversation this way. And all of a sudden, some of the defenses come down, some of the ego state comes in, and then I'll have them turn around and just hold their hands up and not even touch them, but just hold their hands up, almost touching. Ask them, like, what's that connection like? What breaks it? What makes it hard to get through to one another? What facial expressions are you using? People aren't always aware of all their facial expressions. Nonverbals is 80 to 85% of all communication. And so when I see clients, again, do verbal language or nonverbal that creates a disconnect, I'll jump in, I'll say, hey, did you see what you just did and how it impacted the next one? Now they're defensive, and now they're shutting down. Now they're disconnecting. They do these behaviors so much that they don't realize the disconnects they're creating. It's out of defense. It's out of survival. And so I just help them drop their guards and help them see one another emotionally first, then physically, then spiritually. So that's what I'm always pushing them towards. Now, one thing that comes up quite a bit in therapy that I see with clients is like relationships that are broken, gone, or passed away. And so I've learned it on site how to create what's called, we call it psychodrama. We also call it family sculpting, where in my on-site room, I have a big bin in a drawer full of beer cans, glasses, hats, combs, mirrors, all kinds of things that allow me to sculpt for someone, like this person in your life that you're struggling to let go or to connect with. I will, with the client, sculpt the chair to put the person in the room. I recently did a family intensive at on-site with a mom and 3 adult children that their father died in a zipline accident in front of all 4 of them, where the brakes failed, he hit the tree, and it killed him. And they all witnessed this together. And it was a vacation, and just, it was a horrible, horrible tragedy. And the mom had been self-medicating and drinking way too much because it was just too much for her. The kids were concerned. She was dating some local con man in town that was draining her bank account. And we had a family on-site intensive weekend where we created a space in the room that was for the dad, the husband. And everybody participated in the sculpting process. What he would wear, things he would say, again, things that created, and he was in the room the whole weekend. And there were times I would refer, like, what do you think he would say about this right now? How can we include him in this process of grief and loss? And I had them write letters to him. And then I had them write letters back from him to them. And they read and shared them with each other in a space of, like, hey, this is our family, and we're grieving the loss of him, but now we're also fighting for the survival of our mother who's self-medicating with too much alcohol. And so I did some one-on-one with her and the chair that was the husband. What would he be telling you about your drinking right now? And so by using family sculpting, you can bring anyone into the room. I've done family sculpting with clients that had religious trauma. Let's put God in this chair. What would God look like, sound like? And we family sculpt God into a chair. Be how amazed how people crave just hearing God say, I'm proud of you. I love you. It's okay. I'm here. Trust me. And I avoid trying to be the voice of this sculpt as much as possible and let them be that voice, because they know more what that person would say or do. And so create the environment for them to tap into whatever person thing they need to keep it going. Now I want to talk about AI for a minute. If you guys are not utilizing AI, you're missing out. The handout that I provided you guys was, I believe, right fighting. Is that correct?
Say that one more time, Carl.
What's the handout that I sent you guys?
Yes, right fighting.
Okay. I came up with that working with my couples because what I found was sometimes they had the need to be right versus heard and seen. And it always created a disconnect. And the other would interrupt and constantly right fight. So what I did is like AI, went out to ChatGPT. I said, I want a handout that talks about right fighting and how it's not helpful and what to do. And that's the handout that it spit out for me. I've got a few borderlines. I've done handouts for, I want some homework for a 19-year-old borderline who's juggling 2 love relationships and self-medicating and possibly doing self-harm. And boom, it prints out all this homework for me. And I just cut and paste it into a Word doc. I've got AI created on books. I did one yesterday on the 4 temperaments. I didn't know there was 4 temperaments. And so I printed one out yesterday because I had a couple who's really struggling with some anger stuff. As far as I'm amazed how different couples can be, and yet the same issues keep to surface over and over. So again, I really challenge you guys to look into the AI. My peer over here, Miss Amy, she had a let them theory that she all about Mel Robbins. She loves Mel Robbins. I'm like, I need a Mel Robbins handout on Let Them Be. Boom, print it out, hand it to one of my clients. She loves it. Again, AI is where it's going. I find it to be really, really helpful. When I'm at on-site, again, I've got my phone and I have sat in there at lunchtime on my own before. I'm like, hey, I've got a client right now that's struggling with major depressive disorder. And we've tried some art therapy. We've done some equine therapy this weekend. I feel like she's stuck as far as like authority figures in her life, mostly male. And what are some ideas? And it will spit out interventions that are very, again, I've not run into anything so far where it's like, I don't know. It gives me something every time. And so I really challenge you guys had a couple just a month and a half ago I was working with, and she had some huge breakthroughs around family of origin and rejection issues. It was affecting her marriage. He had religious trauma from a Jewish culture where he was forced to comply with Jewish customs he didn't agree with. And as we were celebrating graduation on that Monday morning, I went to chat GPT and I said, I want a poem. Here's her name. Here's what we worked on. And here's where she's at. And it gave me this incredible poem. And as I got to graduation, I said, hey, I got a gift for you. And I read this poem and she was completely flooded with tears. And I took all the credit. Didn't tell him anything about ChatGPT. And I did another poem for him based on his name, based on what we worked on, where he's at, and the victories he found. Incredible poem. Read it to him. He cries like, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? I'm like, it's a gift. So our job is to provide an environment for them to grow and learn. Utilize AI. It's out there, guys. I'm telling you. Tap into that. Yes, ma'am.
We were Haley and I we were at a training for restoration therapy a couple weekends ago, and in restoration therapy, you create a pain cycle, a peace cycle. Anyway, this counselor was using AI to generate pictures of someone's peace cycle. And so it gave not just the verbal use of the peace cycle for the client, but the visual as well. So it was really cool how he did that. I took that away as potential for helping clients in that way.
The visual you can do, the better, because everybody can relate to pictures. I'm currently nursing a pickleball injury, and one of my best friends sent me a picture of all these pickles dressed up in formal wear, doing a dance formal. Like, here's your pickleball for now, Karl, since you can't play. And I loved it. It was awesome. But again, the pictures. Utilize the AI. I want to talk just a minute about pivot and trauma. I've been trained in EMDR for about 5 years. I think sometimes people and clients come in looking for that quick fix. Can we just do trauma therapy, fix this in like 2 weeks and like move on? I like the ability to pivot with that. It kind of goes back to that solution focused theory. You know, if you could change anything right now immediately, and what would you change and how would that change your life? Kind of like the miracle question. And again, I don't like the quick fix. I like the relational portion. I admit I'm a relational therapist. Now, I look for ways to pivot with my clients when they come in looking for that quick fix. Now, like my friend did EMDR, and she, after 2 weeks, she was all better. My neighbor, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, great, but that's not you. So make sure that you're not just handing out solution. When you help the client find solution along with them, it sticks. I don't just give out answers. I make sure I look the client look for it. And I will guide them and help them get there. But when it's their idea, it works a lot better. Now, since the EMDR, I've done brain spotting for 2 years now. I've been to level 2 training on it. I like the brain spotting better. I feel like it's more client driven. But one thing I utilize is the primary senses. So with that comes bouncy balls that light up. I put these in my client's hands. We talk about, again, my 5 primary senses help me store things and help me let go of things. And so I will try and utilize as many senses as I can. I have Native American culture that I grew up around. Being a Native American, our people were big about burning things. I will ask clients to write something out and burn it. When they burn it, they see it, they smell it, they hear it. Again, there's 3 of the 5 senses right there. There's feel, there's writing, the transference. So the more senses that you can bring into the room, the better. I have bubbles. When I got my ADD clients in there, I make them blow bubbles, because guess what happens when you're blowing bubbles? You're breathing really slow. And they don't even realize that they're calming themselves down by blowing these bubbles. And then I'll say, okay, let's see who can blow the biggest bubble and make it a competition. They love that. Again, it's just that teaching them to breathe. All of a sudden, calm down. Okay. With my couples, sometimes I'll come in and I'll say, okay, based on our goals, where are we at? Oh, we're good. Okay. How about conflict resolution? Oh, we're good. We're good. I'm like, okay, so you guys got nothing you're bringing to the table for topic tonight. That's correct. Okay. So I got a jar of tongue depressors, and in them I got different topics. So I ping pong back and forth between them, and we pull out topics, and it creates a lot of discussion. Have things in your office, again, that's ready to go, ready to utilize. I did an amazing session about a year ago with one of my clients who really, really struggled with an emotional connection to his family members. He grew up in a culture where he was told, shut up, suck it up, move on, rub dirt on it, keep going. And his children really craved the father heart of seeing him, feeling him. So I went out to Amazon and I bought a stethoscope, and I had him put the stethoscope on his child's ears, they're all grown adults, and listen to his heart. And while they listened to his heart, We did each individual scripts for each child, what he wanted them to hear. But he started with, I want to share my heart with you more than my mouth. So while he would share these scripts, they would listen to his heartbeat. And it became a profound connection for them to rebuild a whole new side of the relationship with their father. That because he loved them with his heart, but he couldn't get it to come out of his mouth. So we started with this: let them hear your heart first, then read your script. And that stethoscope was like $12 on Amazon. But it was such a profound tool to help him connect to his adult children in a way that he finished therapy and we got to a place to discharge. And I filled out that discharge summary, successful completion, based on him saying, I got what I need. I'd never had this before. So now I'm going to go celebrate this and live this and do this in a way where he missed windows when his kids were small, but now he's bridging it as an adult and they're having amazing relationships. Again, be creative, guys. One of my ADD clients, I got this for Christmas. For me, when I'm a golfer too, it's super challenging. You have to balance this golf ball and get it onto a tee. This keeps your ADD clients busy for hours. Perfect. It's really hard to do. But when they're focused on that, we're not ping-ponging off too many topics, because that's where my ADD clients struggle. They're focused on one thing, and I'm able to drill them down on the topic at hand that we're really trying to work on. So use music, use art. I'm big on quotes. I know all you Brene Brown fans out there, the man in the arena. I'll have clients read this to me when they feel like they're just doing everything wrong and failing over and over. I have them read the man in the arena. The serenity prayer. I access a lot of recovery stuff that people don't realize is recovery stuff, just because it's the world I lived in for almost 21 years now. But those tools, those recovery tools, all come from somewhere, either evidence-based or Bible or combined. The last thing I want to leave you with, guys, don't try to be the expert on everything. I think early in my career, when I had that LPC certification, I'm like, I can do anything. Bring it. And I would try and take on anything that came my way. And if I didn't know it, I'd get a book and we'd do it together. And what I've learned over the years is don't try to be the expert on everything. Be willing to refer and build a referral base on the people you know and trust that are good at it. Here in Tennessee, I've referred many females with eating disorders to people I really trust. When I identified early on, this is not my space, and I want this client to get the help they need. And the client, sometimes we push back and say, "Hey, I know, but I trust you with this." And I'm like, "Hey, I will be a part of your journey, but I want to make sure we're getting the right person in here who's going to really help you get to where you need to get." So it takes a village sometimes. Make sure you utilize the village, because our credential says, yes, we can do anything, but find your niche. And I still call it niche. I'm from Texas. Around here, I hear people say niche. I don't know if something wrong with them, but I really challenge you to know when to tap out and know when to ask for help and utilize the village, because it's really, really important to make sure that you cannot be everything. You need to be what God calls you to be, where you need to be. And that's my show. Thanks for coming.